Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel gsipucmysuru. In today's session, we will be starting with a new chapter of our second PUC electronics syllabus, that is oscillator. What is an oscillator? Oscillator is nothing but an electronic circuit which is used to convert DC energy into an AC energy of desired frequency. We know that DC is not having any kind of frequency, whereas AC is having a frequency. So, depending upon the application what we are using for, we can generate a signal or we can generate an AC signal of desired frequency with one single circuit, what is called as an oscillator. And these oscillators are used in almost all of the electronic devices that can either be a simple mobile phone, a television or a radio or a computer or any other electronic circuits. And these oscillators are broadly classified into two types based on the shape of the signal what is being generated and the components used in the feedback network. So, depending upon the shape or based on the shape of the signal what is generated and based on the components used in the feedback circuit, these oscillator circuits are classified. Shape of the signal ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ it can either be a sinusoidal signal or a non-sinusoidal signal. Sinusoidal signals or a non-sinusoidal signals. Depending upon based on the components what I am going to use ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ I can either use an inductor, the capacitor or simply a resistor. So, depending upon the components what I am going to use in the feedback circuit, these oscillators are also classified. Coming to this sinusoidal oscillators ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ we are going to get the signals like this. Non-sinusoidal oscillators ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ it can either be a square waveform or a triangular waveform or a rectangular waveform or a sawtooth waveform. Sinusoidal signals ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಈ ತರ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. A square waveform can be like this. A rectangular waveform can be like this. Or a triangular waveform can be like this. Or a sawtooth waveform can be like this. Depending upon which type of signal I am generating, whether we are generating a sinusoidal waveform or a non-sinusoidal waveform, these oscillators are classified into sinusoidal oscillators or the non-sinusoidal oscillators. And depending upon the components used, ಯಾವ ಕಾಂಪೊನೆಂಟ್ ಅನ್ನು ನಾನು ಫೀಡ್ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ ಸರ್ಕ್ಯೂಟ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನೋ ಅಕಾರ್ಡಿಂಗ್ ಆಗಿ these oscillators are classified into LC oscillators, RC oscillators and the crystal oscillators. The name itself is specifying in LC oscillators we are going to use the inductor and capacitor, whereas in RC oscillator we are going to use the resistor and the capacitor, and in the crystal oscillator we are going to use a small crystal, hence the name crystal oscillator. So, based on the shape of the signal and based on the components used, these oscillators are broadly classified into sinusoidal or the non-sinusoidal, and the LC oscillator, RC oscillator and the crystal oscillators. Clear? Now let us see what is a damped oscillation and undamped oscillation. This undamped oscillation is also called as the sustained oscillation. So, what is this damped oscillation? It is nothing but the electrical oscillation in which the amplitude either increases or decreases, but the frequency of this signal will remain the same. That is what is called as damped oscillation. Let me draw a diagram. Here the amplitude of the signal is decreasing but the frequency is maintained constant. This is called as a damped oscillation where the amplitude is decreasing. I can also get a signal in which the frequency of the signal will be maintained constant but the amplitude keeps on increasing. Even this can be called as a damped oscillation. An electrical oscillation in which the amplitude keeps on decreasing or increasing provided the frequency of the signal will be maintained constant. Coming to this undamped oscillation, both the frequency as well as the amplitude of the signal will be maintained constant, and this undamped oscillations is also called as the sustained oscillations. So this is the major difference between the damped oscillation and the undamped oscillation. Now let us say the basic principle of an oscillator, or let us find an expression for the voltage gain of a positive feedback oscillator. So in order to understand this basic principle of an oscillator, let us consider a circuit where I will be having a basic amplifier and a feedback amplifier whose gain is beta. The input for this basic amplifier is denoted by Vi, and the output of this basic amplifier will be provided through a separator, and the output is named as V0. A portion of the output will be taken as feedback to this feedback amplifier, and the output of this feedback amplifier will be denoted by Vf, and here we will be having a mixer, and this feedback signal will be given as another input for this mixer. The other input for this mixer will be denoted by Vs. Here beta is nothing but the feedback, and the input for this feedback amplifier is nothing but V0, and the output of this feedback amplifier is Vf. We know that the gain is equal to output voltage divided by input voltage. Houdalva? So the expression for the gain of this feedback amplifier will be beta is equal to output voltage in this. Output is Vf, input is V0. So the output voltage is Vf divided by input voltage is V0. So if I am going to alter this expression, Vf is equal to beta times of V0. So let us write that here, Vf is equal to beta times of V0. So here I am having two amplifier circuits. One is the basic amplifier, the other one is the feedback amplifier, and we are having a mixer as well as a separator. Vi is the input what is given to a basic amplifier, and Vs is also an input without considering the feedback voltage. But Vi anta bandaga, it is a combination of Vs and Vf. So mixer nalli we are combining two signals, one is Vs, the other one is Vf, and the output of that mixer will be named as Vi, and the overall output will be named as V0. So now let us try to derive the expression for the voltage gain of a positive feedback amplifier. So what is this positive feedback amplifier anta helidaga? Let me write it here as 0° phase shift amplifier. I am going to use an amplifier circuit which does not give any phase shift in these two stages. 0° phase shift. Okay. So now what is this positive feedback anta helidre? If the feedback voltage and the input voltage are in phase with each other, then it is called as a positive feedback circuit. Feedback anta helidaga we are having two types, one is the positive feedback and the other one is the negative feedback. Positive feedback anta helidaga whatever the voltage I am extracting from the output side and whatever the voltage I am giving from the input side, if both the voltages are in phase with each other, then it is called as a positive feedback. If the voltage what I am drawing from the output side and the voltage what I am giving from the input side are out of phase. There is a phase shift between these two voltages anta helidaga, then that feedback will be considered as the negative feedback circuit. Now we are considering only the positive feedback circuit where the output voltage or the feedback voltage is in phase with the input voltage, that is Vf and Vs are in phase with each other. Clear? So if we are going to represent that with the help of a waveform, then we will be getting the signals like this. But here we will be getting in the amplified version. If I am going to consider the open loop gain anta helidaga, I am just considering a simple basic amplifier where the input is Vi and the output is V0, then the gain of this will be considered as A. So the open loop gain, open loop anta helidre ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂತ ಫೀಡ್ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ ನಾನು ಕೊಡದೇ ಇರುವಾಗ the open loop gain A will be equal to A equals V0 divided by Vi, or I can write this expression as V0 is equal to A into Vi. ಹೌದಾ? Now after applying the positive feedback, the output voltage is considered as V0 itself, but the input voltage cannot be considered as Vi, it must be considered as Vs, and the gain of this feedback amplifier or the gain of this positive feedback oscillator circuit now should be considered as AF. The open loop gain is considered as A, but the gain of a feedback oscillator now will be considered as AF. So after applying positive feedback, gain is AF equals output is V0 itself, but now input cannot be considered as Vi, we have to consider what is called as Vs. AF is equal to V0 divided by Vs. Since the feedback voltage and the input voltage are in phase with each other, I can easily write that Vi is equal to Vs plus Vf. Vi is equal to Vs plus Vf, but we know that Vf is equal to beta into V0. So Vi is equal to Vs plus beta into V0, and this expression can be altered as Vs is equal to Vi minus beta times of V0. Vi minus beta times of V0. ಹೌದಲ್ವಾ? But we know that AF is equal to V0 divided by Vs. V0 will be written as it is, but in place of Vs we are going to substitute as Vi minus beta V0, Vi minus beta times of V0. If I am going to divide both numerator and denominator by Vi, both numerator and denominator by Vi, what we are going to get is AF is equal to V0 divided by Vi whole divided by this entire term divided by Vi anta agutte. Vi minus beta times of V0 divided by Vi. So if I want to separate this, Vi divided by Vi minus beta V0 divided by Vi anta agutte. Vi gets cancelled, so let me write this step here directly. Vi divided by Vi minus beta into V0 divided by Vi. But we know that V0 by Vi is equal to A, which is nothing but the open loop gain. So in place of V0 by Vi, let me write it as A divided by Vi gets cancelled, so 1 minus beta times of A. So we have got this final expression AF is equal to A divided by 1 minus A beta. So this itself is the expression for the voltage gain of a positive feedback oscillator. AF is nothing but the gain of a positive feedback oscillator, which is given as A divided by 1 minus A beta, where A is the open loop gain and beta is nothing but the feedback gain. Clear? So how do we get with this particular expression? Initially we have to consider the open loop gain. Open loop gain ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ the gain without connecting the feedback. Gain without connecting the feedback ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ I'll be having only this basic amplifier in which Vi is the input and output is equal to V0, and that open loop gain will be denoted by A, which is given by V0 divided by Vi. So what exactly is the meaning of this positive feedback? If the feedback voltage and the input voltage are in phase with each other, then that feedback will be called as the positive feedback. After applying the positive feedback, the gain will be considered as AF, and in that case the output will be equal to V0, whereas the input is equal to Vs, and the gain of a positive feedback will be denoted by AF, which is given by V0 divided by Vs. But in the mixer, I will be getting two separate signals. One is Vs, the other one is Vf. Both are in phase with each other. So Vi will be equal to the sum of these two signals. ಎರಡೂನು out of phase ಆಗಿದ್ರೆ this and this gets cancelled. The Vs minus Vf ಅಂತ ಆಗಿರೋದು ಅಥವಾ Vf minus Vs ಅಂತ ಆಗಿರೋದು depending upon the voltages. So since these two signals are in phase with each other, Vi is equal to Vs plus Vf ಅಂತ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. But Vf, which is nothing but the feedback voltage, can be given as beta into V0. If I am going to substitute that over here, we will be getting Vi equals Vs plus beta times of V0. If I am going to rearrange this expression, Vs equals Vi minus beta times of V0 anta agutte. But we know that the gain of a positive feedback oscillator is given by V0 by Vs. If I am going to substitute for Vs from this particular expression, I will be getting this. If I am going to divide both the numerator and the denominator by Vi, I will be getting this kind of expression. So after simplifying, the output or the gain of a positive feedback oscillator will be given by AF equals A divided by 1 minus A beta. Clear? Now let us see what is called as Barkhausen's criteria. So what is this Barkhausen's criteria? Barkhausen is a scientist who gave two criteria depending upon which we can generate a sinusoidal signals or we can generate a sustained oscillations. So generating a sustained oscillation or generating a harmonic oscillation is very, very important. So according to this Barkhausen's criteria, we are having two criteria. The very first criteria is the total phase shift of this oscillator should be 0 degree or 360 degree. So the total phase shift of this entire feedback oscillator circuit must be equal to 0 degree or 360 degree and ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ the feedback signal and the input signal must be in phase with each other. If this is not in phase with each other, then the signals gets cancelled, that is the input signal and the feedback signal gets cancelled, then the output will be completely different from what we are getting right now. So the total phase shift around the closed loop should be equal to 0 degree or the 360 degree. Just now we derived an expression for the gain of a feedback amplifier where AF is equal to A divided by 1 minus A beta, where AF is nothing but the gain of a positive feedback circuit, A is nothing but the gain of an open loop circuit, beta is the gain of a feedback amplifier. होता है? So the second criteria according to Barkhausen's tell that the magnitude of the product of open loop gain and feedback gain should be equal to unity. Unity ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೇನು 1, and the magnitude of the product of open loop gain and the feedback gain ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ it is this A, the magnitude of A into beta must be equal to 1 ಅಂತ ಅರ್ಥ. So if the gain of this or the magnitude of the product of open loop gain and the feedback gain is equal to unity ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ the gain of a feedback loop ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ನನಗೆ infinity ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. Now let us see what happens for different values of product of A and A into beta. So the very first case is the product of A beta is less than 1. Is less than 1 ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ 1 minus lesser value, then the oscillations will be the damped oscillation like this. The amplitude keeps on decreasing but the frequency will remain constant. The second case is A beta is greater than 1 ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ again we are going to get a damped oscillation, but the amplitude in this case keeps on increasing but the frequency will remain constant. Coming to the last case, if A beta is equal to 1, then we are going to get a sustained oscillation, which is very much important in almost all kind of electronic circuits. So ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾದ ಆಸಿಲೇಷನ್ಸ್ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಅಥವಾ ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾದ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಆಂಪ್ಲಿಟ್ಯೂಡ್ ಇರುವಂಥ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಫ್ರೀಕ್ವೆನ್ಸಿ ಇರುವಂಥ ಸಿಗ್ನಲ್ಸ್ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ we have to make sure that we are following these two criteria, that is these two Barkhaussen's criteria, where the first criteria tells that the overall phase shift of this feedback oscillator circuit must be around 0 degree or the 360 degree, and the product of the magnitude of the product of the open loop gain and the feedback gain must be equal to unity, andre that must be equal to 1. So if you are going to follow these two criteria, then we can easily generate the sustained oscillation or the constant amplitude and the constant frequency ಇರುವಂತ sinusoidal signals na generate ಮಾಡುವಂತ capability ಬರುತ್ತೆ for that particular given circuit. Clear? So in this class we saw what exactly is the meaning of an oscillator and how these oscillator circuits are classified, and these oscillators are classified into two types based on the shape of the waveforms. Shape of the waveforms bandaga whether the shape of the waveform is sinusoidal or non-sinusoidal, and depending upon the components what we are using in the feedback circuit, accordingly these oscillators are classified into LC oscillators, RC oscillators and crystal oscillators. And we also saw what is called as the damped oscillators or the damped oscillation and the undamped oscillations. In damped oscillations, the amplitude of the signal will either increase or decrease provided the frequency of the signal will be maintained constant. Ade undamped anta helidre undamped oscillations nalli the frequency as well as the amplitude of the signal will maintain constant, and these undamped oscillations are also called as the sustained oscillations. After that, we also derive an expression for the voltage gain of a positive feedback oscillator circuit. Positive feedback oscillator anta helidre enu, positive feedback is nothing but a circuit in which the feedback signal and the input signal are in phase with each other. Such circuits are called as positive feedback circuits. So in the oscillator circuits we are going to use the positive feedback circuit, not the negative feedback circuit. So the expression for the voltage gain of a feedback amplifier, that is the positive feedback oscillator, sorry, not the amplifier, positive feedback oscillator is denoted by AF, which is equal to A divided by 1 minus A beta. We also saw what are the two criteria given by the Barkhaussen's. The two criteria are, the very first criteria, the total phase shift must be 0 degree or the 360 degree, and the second criteria is the magnitude of the product of open loop gain A and the feedback gain beta must be equal to 1. So with this, let me conclude this session at this point. I'll be coming soon with the next session. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.